This interview is brought to you in association with Rabobank.
Apiculture New Zealand was formed in April 2016 with the intent of creating a peak industry body for apiculture in this country. Its members are beekeepers, honey packers and exporters, industry-related supply companies and the Bee Products Standards Council. With me to talk about the organisation is Chief Executive Karin Kos. Karin, welcome.
Thank you.
Karin, the figures from your own website say in June 2017 there were, get this right, 811,000 registered beehives in New Zealand and nearly 8,000 registered beekeepers. You've got an industry value that's leapt up to around $315 million. These are big numbers. Tell us about the organisation, what it hopes it can do in terms of making those numbers, I guess, grow.
So Apiculture New Zealand, as you said, was established just over a year ago, and really it was about bringing all of the sectors of the industry together to realise the potential of this phenomenal growth that we've had. I mean, you've seen the value of honey per kilogram increase 8 years in a row, and that's not just for Mānuka honey, it's for all honeys. So that's a stunning success story, but it's really about how do we as an industry maintain that value, maintain that success and really grow the value of the industry across the board, whether it's the honey, whether it's honeybee products, whether it's the value-add products, the medicinal products and the supplements. So we have got a very strong foundation to continue that growth, and the only way we can do that, the only way as an industry we can do that is by joining together, bringing those diverse areas together and building that story and building on that promise together.
If we can just break down the key components in honey. So you have beekeepers, of course, there must be a landowner involved somewhere. You've got a honey packer, and we've talked about the role of exporters, marketers, the supply companies supplying it, and then that Bee Products Standards Council. Can you just explain sort of the role of each or how much integration there is between all of those parts in the chain?
So increasingly there is a lot more integration between all of those sectors. And don't forget we've got the hobbyists as well as the small and large commercial beekeepers. They're responsible for, I guess, producing the honey, bringing the honey to the packers, the processors and the suppliers. But there is a growing integrated supply chain where you see that work across all parts of the business. And I guess fundamentally for the beekeepers, it is about the bee health, it's about maintaining that high quality access to great New Zealand honey. And for the processors, the packers, the marketers, it's about turning that into the value-add products that we sell all around the world. So I would say while they all have their part to play, it is a very integrated supply chain.
When you talk about that year-on-year growth in value, what is driving that? Why did honey, I guess, suddenly go nuts?
So Mānuka honey really has started the phenomenal growth that we've seen in the industry. It's a great product. I mean, it contains abnormally high levels of a compound called methylglyoxal, and that's proven to be very effective in antibacterial things like wound healing. It's a wonderful honey on its own, and I guess it's established, it's been the foundation for the industry to grow value of all of the remaining New Zealand honeys. I mean, I was talking to a researcher just recently about the Mānuka plant, for example, and they're looking at the benefits of riparian planting of Mānuka. You know, basically the ability of the root systems to filter and activate pollutants from intensive agriculture, you know, leading to better water quality. So the honey's fabulous, but the roots are also fabulous in terms of leading to better water quality. So there is a lot behind Mānuka honey, but I guess we can't miss the opportunity for the rest of the honeys in New Zealand to tell their story, and I think that's really the job of Apiculture New Zealand as well, is to tell the wider New Zealand honey story.
So you're not too dissimilar in some ways to the wine industry. You know, you've built on back of Sauvignon Blanc, and now it's time for other varietals to come through and sort of richen the offer.
We absolutely look at the wine industry and see where they're at and look at them as that's where we need to be. Those are, you know, that they are a benchmark for us. And so, for example, we're currently looking at the viability of a Mānuka honey, New Zealand Mānuka honey trust mark, just to shore up our provenance. We're a young industry, and all of that work is going on behind the scenes. Apiculture New Zealand's driving some of it, other parts of the industry are driving some of it, but it is actually, as an industry, how do we work together to really make that change and to really shift where we're at now to where we want to be.
Given the phenomenal growth, I guess it raises the question of where there might be limits, and one of those might be, is there enough, in the case of Mānuka, enough of it to go around for the number of hives there are?
So that is a challenge for industry. As you mentioned, we've seen phenomenal growth, not just in the honey production, but also in the amount of hives that we have. You know, we've got over 800,000 hives. They've doubled in the past 5 years. And I guess how do you, with that amount of hives, how do you sustain with the Mānuka that we have? And so what we're seeing is plantations of planting of Mānuka, and that's becoming a real valid option for landowners and beekeepers. And I'm certainly seeing a lot of interest in this. I get phone calls from farmers, from beekeepers just about every week looking at the opportunity to plant Mānuka. For example, we've got a primary growth program with industry and government, and that is absolutely all about moving industry from wild harvest to science-based farming of Mānuka plantations. And that's all, again, about increasing the yield and reliability of supply, particularly for that medicinal grade of Mānuka honey.
There are some downsides. For example, these hives are now pretty valuable. People have started pinching them. There's money to be made as this industry continues to grow. What can be done about that side of things? I guess cowboy operators, people who might be a threat to the brand, and then people who are just outright being criminal day to day.
Yeah, so the theft of beehives has become a real growing issue for New Zealand beekeepers over the last few years. You know, once we'd see the odd isolated incident, today we're seeing theft occur on a wider scale, and we're seeing organised crime as part of that. But we do have to put it into perspective. I guess, you look at the beehive numbers, they've more than doubled over the last 5 years. But what are we doing about it? Well, I think what I've really been pleased to see is that the police have really come to the party. I mean, they were given the strong message that this is an issue for us. I mean, like farmers, it's theft of livestock. It is absolutely devastating for those beekeepers who are targeted by thieves. And so we need to do things like improving the intelligence held on beehives, what the police do, the honey and those stealing them. Where possible too, the industry needs to take more measures to guard and manage their hives, so keep them in paddocks locked away from public view. Tracking devices and outdoor surveillance cameras, they've become really big in the industry. We are pleased to see the police take a much more active role in taking the theft seriously, and we've seen some success as a result of that. But I guess we could argue that is one of the growing pains of the industry,
Sure.
too, the huge growth.
What is the role for Apiculture New Zealand in the biosecurity equation?
So for Apiculture New Zealand, bee health is critical. And every time we do surveys or we talk to our members, that is the number one issue and the number one concern for our beekeepers. If we don't have healthy bees, we don't have a viable industry. So, for example, myrtle rust, it does attack plants in the myrtle family, and Mānuka is a member of that species. And while our Australian counterparts haven't really seen the impact of myrtle rust on the same species of tree, we are working with government along with other primary producers and looking at things like resistance breeding, for example, over the longer term. So it's really critical that we stay on top of the diseases that are existing now. For example, there's concern now about the growing resistance of existing varroa treatments. They're not working so well. What do we do as an industry body? How do we take a collective view with government and research agencies to solve these issues? And that's the role of a national peak body, to try and bring parties together to try and have the conversations, the collaborative conversations, and to come up with a plan of action. And I think that's really a valuable role that Apiculture New Zealand can play.
We've not got a lot of time left, Karin, but there are two extra issues I'd like to cover. First is the role of Māori. Māori have a very strong interest in Mānuka and have traditionally been very active in the honey space and growing so. How is the organisation working directly with Māori in terms of the broader Māori interest in honey?
So one of the things that we did set up at the start of the year is industry focus groups based around critical issues that we saw as important to the industry. And Māori is definitely one of those, and we've set up a Māori engagement focus group. In fact, we had a meeting in August, And it really is about us working in partnership with Māori to understand the issues that are important to them and to get their input into things like bee health, into things like myrtle rust. What do we need to do with myrtle rust? Our apprenticeship scheme, what's important to them in the apprenticeship scheme that we're working on. So that is early days yet, but I'm really pleased that we actually have that in place and that there is a foundation to build a strong iwi Māori engagement with the industry. It's absolutely critical to our future. For me, just going around talking at field days, talking at conference, I cannot believe the amount of interest in apiculture as an industry, and also apiculture as a skill and a scheme pathway for young people. And so I think we absolutely have a responsibility to develop a professional apprenticeship scheme, and we're working through that at the moment. You know, we've got a 3-year certificate program that we're working on, option to move into year 4, and it's all about lifting the skills in the industry, making it attractive to people to come and join the industry because it'll be a great training program for them. And when we asked the industry for feedback on the scheme and existing training, 2 key themes came through. There was the need to raise the level and consistency of the content that we currently deliver, and that's done through a lot of different agencies around the country, but also the delivery, just lifting up the range of skills and the tutors, some of the tutors not being beekeepers, for example. Those things are important to industry. So I think for us, the ability to deliver a consistent, strong education pathway through an apprenticeship scheme will be a really attractive proposition to a lot of people.
Brilliant. Look, Karin, we've got to end it there. Thank you very much for your time today, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
This interview was brought to you in association with Rabobank.